This week on Notorious Scoundrels podcast.
You're going to leave that in, right, Jay? Awesome.
Of course he is.
Do we need to count back?
Just leave everything in. What editing does this guy do anymore?
Welcome to the Notorious Scoundrels podcast.
Welcome to the post-AdeptiCon episode for the Notorious Scoundrels podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Michael Dashesberry. I'm here alongside some of my best buds. I've got David Endless Zelenka. How you doing, my man?
Doing fantastic, sir. How about yourself?
I'm fantastic. I'm pumped. This weekend was great. We've also got Kyle Orchimedes Dornbos here, who I had the pleasure of spending about 20 hours in the car with this weekend. Have you recovered?
Mostly. I played Imperial Discipline on Monday morning, so.
Fair enough. It was quite exhausting. So we had a fantastic weekend at AdeptiCon. I hope everybody had a chance to watch the 20 hours plus that we live streamed straight from AdeptiCon. So on Thursday, we had a live stream of the Clone Wars release panel, which was fantastic. I think that was about an hour. You can catch me and Jay sort of messing around on there for a little bit. And then later that night, we had a unboxing / testing video of the new tank and the new land speeder with Luke Cook and Evan Bulris, which was absolutely fantastic. We only played about 3 rounds because we were super tired and setting up. And then on Friday, we had I believe a 10-hour live stream that opened with an interview from Alex Davey of the Last Chance Qualifier. Saturday, we of course had another 10-hour live stream of the High Command Invitational along with Alex Davey for another 3 hours midway through the day. It was pretty fantastic. And our own Kyle Dornbos made Worlds. How are you feeling about that? This has been a very long road. What are your thoughts?
I'm excited. It's funny. So all 4 of my opponents also made top 8. So it was like the best possible outcome because they were all also friends of mine, people I had met and interacted with before, although at least in R1's case, not in person, but it was awesome because, I didn't even knock anybody else out in the process. Everybody I handed a loss to also got an invite, so it's like the best possible outcome. I'm pretty stoked to go hang out in Minnesota with those 8 guys.
No post-invite guilt is what you're saying.
Yeah,
nothing on your conscience.
I didn't crush any dreams.
I gotta say, when I looked at so for anybody that doesn't know, the results are posted up on Tabletop TO. I think they're open to the public. Anybody can log. I don't think you even have to log in to see them. But I looked at your strength of schedule compared to everybody else's. It's like a 0.84. Everybody else is like 0.6, 0.5, 0.43. Yours is like double most.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's mathematically the highest possible strength of schedule, right? Because all 3 of my opponents were 3-1, and then Kingsley, who I faced in the final, was 4-0. So
right,
I think that is in fact the mathematically highest possible strength of schedule.
Like the combination of you and your 4 opponents, I think between the 5 of you guys dropped 4 games in total.
Yep.
So, that's pretty incredible generally that you were able to get through that gauntlet, and that's fantastic.
Well, they were all very close games, and my opponents played it very tight in every case. So
were there any specific events and instances you wanted to kind of talk about?
So my first game with R1 was it was very conservative from both of us. It was moisture vaps on blue player, so there wasn't any super splashy moments in that game.
Sure.
The final score was 68-62, which is the difference between 1 DLT unit and a 1 Z6 unit.
By score, I assume you mean
MOV, points destroyed.
He
our evaporators were tied and those casualties were both on the very last turn. He he deleted a Z6 unit with a stormtrooper, or sorry, with a snowtrooper unit, and then I killed a DLT storm with Leia. So
I ask you though, how many like single unit leaders were left on the board? Because I mean, it's a low score, but like,
oh no,
you guys weren't just holding back.
yeah,
and,
no,
like,
we had a lot of
not
like
doing
task
damage to
rank
each other.
depleted units. Both my sniper teams were down to one model. He had the triple sniper pull the strings guardian thing going on with Palpatine. So my CB was just completely ineffective at like eliminating any snipers, and then he basically sniped two of my sniper models. So my sniper spent literally the entire game doing dodge and standby behind line of sight blocking terrain. So I basically lost and conceded the sniper war on turn 1.
Ouch.
Yeah, I know,
It's a
right?
good way to start a game.
But luckily I was blue on moisture evaporators, which, you know, as we've talked before, is a defensive position. So it was still, even though I didn't have snipers, he was still like it was on him to make something happen. So he pushed his royal guard up at one point, like into the center, and I moved a Z6 out to take an open shot at it, and they had already been damaged by like mines and guardian previously. So they actually killed 2 IRG models in one shot and left it with just the unit leader. So that kind of like killed his momentum on that push, and he had to burn Give Into Your Anger basically to save that IRG.
Nice.
So yeah, that put me in a pretty good, like tempo wise, that put me in a pretty good defensive position for the rest of the game.
How do your other games go?
So I also played Gordon Chase and Daniel Lupo in the middle rounds. Gordon, we did it was Breakthrough Disarray, and he had a very similar list to mine, except he had one more activation. It was kind of a crazy game. I ended up with scoring units in both of his zones, and the final score I think was 7-5. I was able to kill a couple units along the way there, sort of kiting with Pathfinders. The Pathfinders were actually amazing in that game. And then Lupo he's the Saboteur player. He's basically running Wonder Twins with triple Sabs. And it's a nasty list. Sabs are weird. We played on Bespin, which, if you are familiar with the TTS map, has a lot of like blind corners and tall walls and stuff like that. But again, I was in that situation. I was a blue player on Vaps, so he still kind of had to come to me. But he made like a really strong push on one of my evaporators, and it actually ended up being basically a bloodbath. It was the closest. It was the messiest game I had as far as like points destroyed. I killed like 400 something points, and he killed like 300 something points. So
Sabs in general on the Bespin map seem pretty crazy.
Yeah, he actually only got I scoped one early, so he actually only got like 2 meaningful bombs off, which, you know, in some cases is still enough. Like he had one that hit 4 units.
Ouch, man.
Which hurt.
Yeah, so
yeah.
I gotta ask you, did he do that little medic tech on you, or was it just, were his Sabs just like so depleted that he couldn't do the medic thing?
No, he did. So I want to talk about this real
Yeah.
quick, because there's actually 2 things he did with Sabs that were super clever. If actually he was on a streamed game on the Last Chance qualifier with Master of the Force Luke, where you can see some of this stuff in action. So the first thing what you talk about with the medics is you run medics, or he runs medics with Sabs. You essentially corner peek with the Sab unit leader, detonate a bomb in a good spot. You know, it probably kills your own unit leader also. But since they work like a sniper strike team, you know, you then replace essentially the safe guy, the one that's behind line of sight blocking terrain, with the unit leader. And then now, you know, that unit leader is behind line of sight blocking terrain, and then you bring back the other model with a medical droid, and you can place it anywhere in cohesion. So you drop that same medical droid, you know, that second model behind line of sight blocking terrain and cohesion. So it's like a detonate peekaboo essentially. And he did do that once versus me. He also runs them with stims, which makes him pretty difficult to kill in the first place.
And when I faced it, he also ran Chewie, which was like the 3rd redundancy. But I think after figuring out that trick with medics, he got rid of Chewie in a hurry and said I could put Luke in my list.
Yeah, it seems like it. Right, exactly. And Luke was a big factor in this game. Also, we had dueling Lukes. Mine came out on top, and Luke was part of the points destroyed. So, but yeah, the other clever thing you did with Sabs, for those aspiring Sabs player, is I managed to line up like an open shot with one of my Z6s against one of his Z6 units. But like I normally would, and like most players normally would, you try and stay at like the max effective range whenever possible. So I essentially just bumped the range ruler right up against range 3, and got exactly range 3 to the closest model, which was in this case not a unit leader. And he happened to have a proton charge near them. So after I moved, but before I attacked, he's like, "I'm detonating this proton charge." I'm like, "Okay." So he blows it up. He kills one of his models, and he picks up the model that I'm in range of. So now I'm no longer in range of that unit.
Oh, clever.
Yeah, so essentially, it's very
Super
clever.
clever.
A Z6 shot, it was a full squad, so it's 4 blacks and 6 whites against them in the open. Blowing a bomb up on yourself is 1 red, 2 whites. So that's obviously, slightly better than getting shot by a Z6. And also, like, if he whiffs or saves the hit or something like that, he now has a suppression token, and he's now in cover against my Z6 shot. So I thought it was exceptionally clever. I was like, man, that's the coolest thing I've seen someone do with the SAB.
Yeah, so I mean, like, props at Daniel for figuring all that out, right? Like, that's crazy.
Yeah, he said he's been playing SABs exclusively since they came out, basically. He said he's got more than like 40 or 50 games logged with SABs. So
I'm sure he's got all sorts of
yeah.
tricks like that he's kind of like figured out that are super corner case, because SABs are one of those things, mines generally, where you like toss them down and like you end up in these really weird situations that wouldn't come up otherwise, because most
right,
people don't
exactly.
use
Yeah, it was actually, I think it was my most fun game of the day, because it was the craziest. There were a lot of like bizarre situations. He also had officer fleets where I did like the force pull them towards my lines with cohesion and then Son of Skywalker them.
That tends to happen with officer fleets against Luke. They tend to just get shredded.
Yeah, I mean, it was actually so we had rapid reinforcements, and he dropped them in and he was able to do it in a spot where he had heavy cover, and they were able to like essentially delete one of my units where he dropped them, which is exactly what happened. And then I was at least temporarily on the offense because he was up on points because I hadn't killed a unit yet. So, and being on offense against a SAB player is not a good place to be.
That's the literal worst place
for sure.
Yeah, so that's why I did that Son of Skywalker. Essentially I last firsted Luke to get to those fleets because I had to delete something to swing it back, and it basically went back and forth like that for the last 3 turns of the game. So it was a pretty crazy game. That was fun. And then my last game was against Kingsley, who I won't talk about too much, A, because it's on stream, so if people want to watch it, they can do that, and B, because
we also talk about it a lot at the end of this episode. So.
Right, so we are in fact interviewing Kingsley today. Well, we interviewed him. It's pre-recorded on Monday, but we talk about our game, so I won't talk about it too much. Basically, my mistake in this game was being afraid to make one.
Classic.
Yeah, so I'm normally like a fairly conservative, like attrition-focused player, and Kingsley is also. But he had his list was primarily different from mine in that he didn't have the Pathfinders, but instead he had a Z6 and a sniper. And then also he didn't have fleets, he just had an extra Z6. So he had like a slight advantage in terms of range 3+ firepower. And the map we played on was that temple map where you have like the 2 big temple structures on either side, which are strong positions, but there's also like not really anything in the middle. So I couldn't, I was essentially like committed to a firefight where I was like down 2 units, because of my fleets and the lack of a 3rd sniper. So it was something that like I should have realized early that the status quo was not going to work for me, and I needed to just make like an aggressive play from the get-go. And I had a couple things, like I actually managed to line up an alpha strike with Pathfinders on a Rebel Trooper squad in the open, and through a combination of him playing Mile Eye as the Force to give him a dodge token, and then me having a substandard Pathfinder roll, I only killed 1 model, so that was a little underwhelming. My Pathfinders generally did pretty well on the day, but that was not one of their best games. So
Should have taken Biston.
I think that's where I'm
Maybe
going.
we can
We'll
talk
see.
about Biston at some point in the episode, but that's maybe
Yeah.
that's we got a lot more to cover. But
We
yeah.
have a
So
lot to
the
cover.
folks,
But I don't want to spend too much time on my games, but
Yeah.
it was a fun but very tight and exhausting day.
So folks, stay tuned for the Kingsley interview coming up in the later part of the episode if you want to hear more about that specific game, and also make sure that you look at the YouTube stream from the Fifth Trooper for the Last Chance qualifier for those games as well that Orc mentioned.
Yep. Yeah, definitely check out the stream. There's tons
Or not
of
Last
awesome
Chance,
stuff
excuse
on
me,
the
High
stream.
Command. Jeez, the right tournament.
Right?
Gosh, it all runs together after a
Well,
while.
I mean, to be fair, you guys were on the
I know,
Last
right?
Chance qualifier stream.
True. Just on the other side of the desk.
Yeah, you guys were in suits and ties.
Yeah.
Which was fantastic.
Yeah.
It was the,
Yeah, y'all missed out if you didn't
was
come to
the
AdeptiCon.
Yep, I had my Star Wars tie. My Rebel cufflinks. Yeah,
My
it was
Wookiee
awesome.
pin.
It's definitely the less stressful
Yeah.
side of the desk. So yeah, that was me. It was fun. It was a whirlwind. I kind of just took it one game at a time. I didn't really have any expectations going in, so
I had expectations for you, but that's fine. And you met them, so we're all good. We're all good.
Yeah,
all good.
I'll just second that and say I figured you'd make it. So
well, I appreciate it. I appreciate the confidence.
So, David, you want to kind of talk about your experience at High Command?
Yeah, to keep, I mean, I'm not going to talk about the games I am going to talk about are my losses because those were the more like interesting games, in all honesty. High Command, of course, was a really fun tournament to be a part of. We got a ton of swag, and all those medals looked really fun, but it looked really fun going on other people's necks and not mine. Yeah, so the first we started off with just the LCQ setup and stream, and that was, I was so happy. And I mean, I gotta say thanks to Jay and thanks to Fifth Trooper folks, and of course, to both of you, because that was a really cool experience. I got to meet Luke in person. I got to meet so many people in person. So I mean, the overall answer to your question, how was your AdeptiCon? It was great. But in terms of like when people come to listen for the tactics portion of the podcast, I just want to talk about a couple things. Mostly from the games that I lost. I won my first game, and then my second game I met Freeman on Bespin, which I was like, oh great, I got to play Nick Freeman. And then I thought to myself, well, if I lose, Freeman's probably going to 4-0 this tournament, so I guess I'm in a good place. But basically, he was running this really cool Han Chewie Leia list that was really off meta, but also incredibly strong against what was present. Like it might have been the most on meta, off meta list. You know what I mean? But during my loss, like I had the slight lead, but then I kind of blundered Luke away. And I knew that against like Han Leia Chewie, I had to blow up his Chewbacca because that was kind of the linchpin of his list. Basically, just using Chewie to win the sniper war and win the attrition game,
Sure.
And then just sort of force you over. But I gotta say, like Nick Freeman, I'm just gonna say this: I think he's about 50% mechanically better than the rest of the community. I really do think this. Like he is very on point with how he's got his moves planned out, generally speaking. And I think that was really what lost me the game most of all, was just he had his positioning just on point and his activation order just on point. And I think if my mechanics were less flawed, I think it would have been a much closer game. And so that was very instructive to me. Just, make sure that you actually measure every time and be very, very aggressive, like more aggressive than I ever thought was appropriate, I guess, because I come from an X-Wing background where you're specifically told that measuring is not okay. So you kind of got to break that habit, I think, if you're coming from other games where measuring is not allowed. Just be aggressive and measure like crazy. But the fallout of that game ultimately was he kind of used my own battle deck against me because his list favored Long March and so did mine, but his did it better than mine. So there you go. We got Long March Vaps, and he managed to put a ton of pressure on my Vap, even though I, read down his change of plans and was able to, get my bombard off turn one despite his efforts to prevent that happening. So yeah, I mean that's basically all I have to report from that game. I blundered Luke away in a seriously bad move. I put Luke in a very bad spot, and I immediately lost. Essentially, I mean I held on for 2 more rounds, but it was still like that was the moment the game had ended. Was when he lost Chewie and I lost Luke. Um, my second game was against a no less tough opponent in Eric Riha, also known as R1H4. Someone I've played online many times with a Palp list. And again, my battle deck kind of betrayed me because I had key positions in my battle deck. I was able to force disarray, but of course R1 was able to force key positions against Palpatine, so that's just mega terrible. And yeah, I mean against R1, it was a matter of just knowing what terrain pieces are actually going to grant you cover in any given situation. So, and I say this because there were a few times where a very large piece of terrain, you wouldn't think it would deny you cover, but it doesn't matter. Like if you're both touching the same piece of terrain, even if that piece of terrain's like 2 feet long, it's not going to grant you cover. And so you think you have a lot of room to maneuver when you really don't. And so that kind of like is just knowing the board and reading the board more accurately was kind of the big lesson that I took away from that.
Yeah, I mean, just talking about that specific interaction, I think that there's some room for improvement into how some of the cover rules work like that. Like, like if you're 2 feet away from another unit that's like touching the same terrain piece, technically, I don't know. You don't get cover. It feels weird.
Yeah, the net result is an open DLT shot.
Yeah.
Like that's the net result.
It's kind of, I mean, like, I don't know if that's clean upable, but I think that that's like something good to talk about with your opponent, like prior to the game. Because like a lot of the terrain rules are kind of just like suggestions. And if you guys were to like agree, like this 2 feet long terrain piece, if we're within like range 2 of each other, like grants cover, but anything beyond that maybe doesn't, or something like that.
Yeah, it was one of those cases where like neither of us really thought about it until it came up.
Yeah,
and it came up in the middle of round 3 when he pulled the strings on a DLT storm.
I think it's one of those things that because the game's so new and some of these interactions haven't come up because we haven't, I mean, let's be real, we don't all have the awesome and sweet terrain that was at Adepticon to play on every day. Some of this stuff just hasn't come up before.
Yeah, it really hasn't.
Yeah, and generally speaking, like, props to Brendan and everyone else that had a role in like getting the terrain together and set up and everything, because it was, generally speaking, awesome.
Oh yeah.
Almost without exception. There's going to be some when you got 32 tables, but
I loved there was a board that had like a big Yoda Buddha on it. It was awesome.
Yeah, that was awesome looking.
Yeah, and then I think it was Imperial terrain. They're sort of like landing pad and hangar set with the big TIE fighter on it that was right next to that board. Also incredibly sick. And I mean, how can we forget also to mention? I think it was Jim Martin that made the Zeta shuttle on the Scarif Beach. That was a really cool one.
Yeah, I think it was custom built too. Like he scratch built that.
Yeah, just insane the amount of creativity and effort that people put into making these awesome terrains that we all get to play on and be the benefactor of with no like contribution on our own. It's basically charity.
So I will say that if anybody wants to kind of get like a high octane view of the boards, Brendan the Marshal, I believe, used his own drone to kind of do like a flyover in the LCQ and high command videos. And we kind of broadcast that during the downtime. It's really cool. You can like see games in action and stuff. And like action shots of the boards. It's just, if you want to take a closer look at the boards, that's a pretty good way to do it.
Yep, for sure.
So, I mean, that's kind of all I want to say about my games. Yeah, my last game I kind of just let go because I knew I was 1 and 2, and I just tried to have fun. And it was a silly little Luke Jin game, and I kind of got schooled pretty bad. So, yeah. So, Mike, do you want to talk about your games?
Yeah, so I played a lot of games this weekend, guys. It was a lot of Legion. So for those that maybe weren't aware, I was not qualified for High Command prior to this weekend. So I was very much fighting for my tournament life in the Last Chance qualifier. So I ended up playing 8 games this weekend because I ended up making the cut, which was fantastic. I honestly cannot really remember my games from Friday. Yeah, I mean, like I'm having a hard time even remembering like who I played and stuff. Suffice to say, it was very blurry. The end of Friday, I was I was playing BG More from the Discord. We had a great game. It ended up being like a breakthrough game where it was clear that like I kind of had an advantage into his deployment zone, and he was trying to play very defensively to knock me out. I think I ended up like winning it like 4-0 ish. But it was like one of those situations where had the game gone like another turn or two, he was probably would have tabled me because I was doing a lot of moving and not a lot of shooting. In any case, I ended up making the cut for High Command, which was sweet. It was fantastic. It's what I've been kind of trying to. That was kind of my goal for this year, was to make it to High Command. A Worlds invite would have been really cool, but ever since that Kyle Dornbos guy, knocked me out of High Command contention at Nova, I've been chasing this. So water under the bridge now, right? Water under the bridge. I got my sweet Palpatine alt arts, so I'm thrilled. So on Saturday, my opening game was against Stephen McLaughlin. I believe that's his name. I'm sorry, Stephen, if I messed that up. Great guy. He's actually, I think, from Richmond. He, I think, might have been the only person playing Jin this weekend, at least at High Command, I think. Not positive on that, but it's definitely the only Jin I saw. It was another breakthrough game. I messed it up really bad. Boba at one point had a shot on a unit leader that was alone and lonely and needed to be buried, and he didn't do it. So I ended up losing by 1, which was unfortunate. So I started the day off 0-1. I then played I should remember this, Alberto Paz, and kind of a rematch from LVO. It was a pretty boring game overall. It was Sabotage of Moisture Evaporators. I was blue player. It was not very remarkable. I ended up winning on tiebreakers. Game 3, I played Joe DePinto, also from the Chicago group. Has a great podcast called Legion Academy. Shout out to those guys. We played on stream on the High Command day, and Alex Davey actually commentated a large portion of our game. So check it out. Yeah.
But hang on. By a large portion, you mean
the
entire
game. I'm trying to not get too excited about it, but it was pretty cool. It was pretty cool.
Alex was on stream for the entirety of round 3, which was like 3 hours. Just like talking about Legion, and
the guys in the booth must have been in heaven,
right?
Like that's the dream right there.
Yep.
So that happened. I beat Joe on stream. We were playing a key positions game. I think we talked afterwards. I don't think he felt really good about the list he brought to High Command. And I think he switched some things up, tried to get a little creative, and it seemed like he wasn't super confident in it. He played great. I think he was right in that the list maybe didn't support him as well as it could have. Game 4 was a kind of make or break my record for 3-1. It's possible I could have made the top 8 based on tie breaks. I don't know if I would have, based on how the day shook out, had I won that game, but I was playing Dustin Foreign. It was another game of Sabotage the Moisture Evaporators because I love that objective. Turns out that sabotage the moisture evaporators gets a lot harder when your opponent has a bunch of like recon intel snow troopers with flames of frag grenades. So that game didn't go well for me because he just burned my guys alive. It ended up so somebody came over to the table like midway through round 5 and they're like, huh, that's a mess, because we had like 9 units engaged in various melees. Like, because we were like trying to block each other from the evaporator, because what ended up happening was the frag snows made it to one of my evaporators before I finished putting wounds on it, which was clearly a problem. And it, we started tying up each other's units in the hopes that like they couldn't touch the evaporator, right? So that he couldn't push it farther down and I couldn't push it farther up. And so he had more activations than I did, and it just didn't work out. I think I made a critical error in where I placed the evaporator, specifically because of the flame snows. I could have messed with that a little bit, and it was a good learning experience from that point of view. But so I ended up finishing the day 2-2, but I made high command. I was very thrilled with everything. Kyle made it. Our buddy Gordon Chase, who's also in our group that plays at Huzzah Hobbies, made it. So Nova now, is 25% of the field at Worlds. So I am absolutely ecstatic.
Yeah, it was awesome. It was a great weekend. And just, meeting everybody, like a lot of people. Obviously, we met at LVO, but there were, a lot more people that we know from the Discord and Facebook that we hadn't met yet that came to AdeptiCon. So it was just great, meeting everybody in person.
Shout out to all the guys that helped Jay on stream Saturday, because that was the original plan for me before I made high command. Thank you, gentlemen. You really stay.
Can we quickly relate Luke's tale of sorrow? Do we have time?
I think we totally do, because I think that was one of the very significant moments of the weekend, and I want to talk about it too, because I think it stresses how awesome our community is.
Yeah, it's like super poignant, right? So Luke's from Australia. He does the Master of the Force channel, also Master of the Fleet, because he comes from Armada, generally speaking. But he loves Legion, plays the heck out of it. Wanted to come to America for the Adepticon High Command LCQ thing, and came overseas, and he spent a whole bunch of time traveling internationally with all his minis. And then he comes over, and while he's in an airport in Iceland, someone robbed him and made off with his minis case.
That's
totally brutal. So his whole army got stolen on his at Keflavik Airport in Iceland.
I think he missed his flight. Because he was looking.
Yeah, he even missed his flight. Yeah, he even missed his flight. Poor guy. And so the whole community responded so open-heartedly and warmly to this event happening, and he was basically someone, I think Schmitty from Steel Strategy overnighted him an army to play. There's all kinds of international support coming in for him. People gave him money to buy new stuff, and I'm sure maybe we could have him on to tell you more about it directly. But I mean, it's such a heartwarming story to see the community come together to support a player who, was coming from the other side of the world and ended up with such a hard time, getting there. And he still did awesome. He went 2-2 at the LCQ, and even in his sort of rusty state, he really hadn't had a chance to play Legion since Wookiees came out, and to go 2-2 at an LCQ with all the new stuff out there, it's wow, that's really cool. And then he also joined us for casting at High Command. He went in the booth, he borrowed his suit and just went in there, and he did great. He was really a joy to have, from what I understand.
Yeah, I just think it's so fantastic that the community stepped up to help this guy that clearly, I mean, flights from Australia are not cheap, and I'm pretty sure that the donations and stuff that came in covered a lot of his costs. And it was really heartwarming to know that this is like that there are paragons in our community that are willing to go to these lengths to make sure that, we're all kind of brothers in arms. So shout out to everybody that did stuff.
Yeah, I don't know all the
help with
names of
that.
the people that help, but like, thank you all if you're within the sound of our voices right now, because you're amazing and you're part of what's making the community a really good place to be.
He was joking that he's going to use this as an excuse to switch to Empire.
Actually,
but I think he is now.
Actually, he is. I saw pictures of his royal guard painted today. I think he literally is.
Well, there you go.
I think the majority of the gifted units were Empire. I think that there was like a couple Rebel units in there, but overall, I think it was almost all Empire stuff.
Well, there you go.
Yeah. So, thank you, Luke, for streaming with us on Saturday. I believe you were, we had Ed and Nerfly and Evan streaming too. Thank you guys for, streaming High Command. It was fantastic. And thank you, Jay, clearly, for streaming.
Yeah, massive props.
And it was great production value. Like we watched it on the drive home. I mean, like Mike watched it in the passenger seat.
Yeah. Kyle was not watching the videos. He was driving. I promise. There were maybe a couple snapshots, but
Yeah, I was driving safely, mostly.
Don't let your wife listen to this.
So yeah, I was huge shout out to Jay and Luke and Ed and Erfley and Evan and everybody else that was involved in that. It was just amazing. So all right. Yeah, so other stuff happened at AdeptiCon too, right?
I think
some small news.
We've talked about everything that happened on Friday and Saturday, but I think there's some stuff that happened Thursday that maybe we haven't covered yet. Huh?
Yeah, so Clone you want okay. Jay says interview first.
All right, we'll do the interview first. So guys,
all right.
hold on to your seats, strap on your pants. We're going to have an interview with Kingsley, and we will be back after that to talk some Clone Wars.
And we're back with Davis Kingsley. How you doing, man?
I'm doing well. How about yourself?
Pretty good. It was a very fun but also very tiring weekend for all of us, I think.
Yep.
You took home the top prize on High Command. Congratulations.
Thank you.
How'd you feel about being on stream like 6 billion times?
Honestly, going into the last game, I had requested to not be on stream since I'd already been on there twice. And
You're
I was
just
like,
so
all
good.
right. Yeah, it ended up being cool. I had requested that they have, they put some other cool game on it, and I play on some table that I hadn't seen before. But they wanted to have the top matches up there, and I think it ended up being a cool and interesting game anyway.
Yeah, I think of the two maps, I think both of us probably would have had more fun on that other one. But
I think the desert map led to more dynamic gameplay. I think the temple map looked better aesthetically, but I think there are a few issues with the terrain on that map.
Yeah, it was just a little fiddly. It was very pretty, but
yes,
yeah, some mechanical issues, and it created there's kind of a no man's land in the middle of the table too.
The number of times that I was like bumping my guys, or they were sliding down the steps when I tapped it with the measuring stick or whatever it was, wasn't great.
So
yeah,
let's slow down here for a second. This match was between the two of you now, wasn't it?
Yes, it was.
You guys literally juked it out. This is cool. We've got like both sides of the opposition in this interview. That's pretty fantastic.
Yeah.
is this our post game interview?
Right? I mean, it might as well be.
We can turn the camera back on ourselves and take a look at what's going on, or the microphone, as the case may be, depending on where we are.
So, why don't you run us through a little bit about the match, Kingsley?
Yeah, so we ended up playing, it was key positions, major offensive on the temple map. Major offensive on that map basically means that each side gets one giant temple that's sort of theirs. And we kind of turtled up on our giant temples, taking pot shots at each other for a while. And then at the end, my guys scooted in there on the objective, and that was that.
Yeah, it was probably not like a super fun game to watch. There was a lot of measuring and a lot of like sniper shots and random Z6 pot shots, but there was that big area in the middle that I think both of us were hesitant to move into.
There were a few interesting moments despite that. There was a cool move with Pathfinders infiltrating to get a shot on like one of my backfield units without them having cover, but the dice did not incredibly cooperate.
For a while on the ride home.
I was like so excited. I'm like, I can't believe I pulled off a no cover shot on a Rebel Trooper squad, and then I think I got like 1 hit, or I might have got 2 hits.
It was 3 hits, but I had played I'd played my ally as the Force to give them a dodge because I was worried about it.
Yeah.
So that brought it down to 2, and then I made one of the saves, so I lost one guy.
I remember the end result was just 1 guy dying.
Yeah, that's the thing with.
Yeah, it was.
I was like.
That's the thing with Paths. You do all that work, and then the dice betray you because they're mostly white dice.
I mean, the my ally was a good move in that, like,
the
3 hits is not so below average on Pathfinders with POW. You know, it's a little bit, but like 4, little over 4 is average.
That was also the turn where I was being brave with Luke. I actually moved him up, and then you had a bunch of guys that were lining up sort of just out of the area, and I was like, I think I'm going to go back, and then he went back to hang out on my temple.
Yeah, I think I did like a wound to him with some pot shots, but that was about it.
Yep.
Yeah, it was. I was talking with Kingsley after the game. I think definitely, and we can talk about your list here in a minute. But your list was built for that kind of exchange, and mine was like a little bit disadvantaged in that setup by comparison.
Yep.
And I think yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was going to say I realized like probably 2 turns too late that the status quo was not one that that was to my advantage. I think I needed to make like an aggressive push almost from the beginning on your right side there.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think I think that if it had been a different deployment type, it might have been more to your advantage, like battle lines or something like that, where it's more spread out.
Yep. I agree.
I think that, especially with the way that map is laid out, that would offer more opportunities to kind of maneuver behind terrain and try to get the fleet troopers in.
Yeah, those fleets actually did very little for me over all 4 games.
Yeah, I'm somewhat known as a fleet trooper hater, but yeah.
So actually, go ahead, Kyle.
Well, I was going to say, go on. Why do you hate fleet troopers?
Yeah, I was throwing.
Well, I guess it's less that I hate fleet troopers and more that I'm bad at using them, because almost whenever I play them, it seems like I don't get results. They usually get picked off before they do anything. They do have a really strong attack at range 2. You know, I've seen the calculations on your blog, actually, Orchimedes, where fleet troopers are just like the most efficient unit by far. But
it's difficult to set shots up with them.
Yeah, it's, you know, if fleet troopers were range 3, obviously they would be insane and they would be the only thing you would take. But range 2 is a really big disadvantage, despite the fact that you get a very substantial efficiency increase when you do get in. I want to test them out more with strict orders. I think that might be a way to prevent them from getting suppressed, which is one thing that's often kind of their downfall when I'm running them. But overall, I just like the ability to kind of it doesn't quite like dictate the pace or whatever, but I like being able to be like, I'm totally fine to sit back and not move up if I don't have to, and just kind of barrage the opponent at a long range.
So speaking of strict orders, do you want to just talk about your list real quick?
Yeah, so I had a extremely boring list, actually. I had Luke with push, mind trick, and emergency stims. Mind trick is the only kind of unusual thing. I took it because I had free points. It was nice. It was fairly useful. It wasn't amazing. I had Leia, who had strict orders and improvised orders. Again, fairly standard. Nothing too crazy there. I had 6 Rebel Trooper units. All of them had Z6s. 2 of them had Recon Intel, but 4 of them were just Z6s, no other upgrades. 2 of them were the Z6s and the Recon Intel, and then I had 3 snipers with no upgrades. So this is almost as boring as it gets. Oh, and I think that comes in at 796. It's almost as boring as it gets. I had made one change at like not quite the last minute, but like I think the night before I had decided to not take Pathfinders. I had been intending to take Pathfinders and run 5 Z6s and 3 snipers, which would have looked a lot more like your list. But I hadn't been getting that good results. I don't know. I still actually don't know at this point whether or not the issue is me not knowing how to use Pathfinders or Pathfinders actually being bad or what exactly the issue is. But I hadn't been getting great results with Pathfinders. And I know that in theory they're quite strong, but I was like, I think I'm going to go with something that's more reliable. So I ended up going with the Z6 and the 3rd sniper instead of the Pathfinders. Then I was originally going to take grappling hooks on one of my sniper teams, but I kind of balked at the last minute on that one also. Ended up not taking it and going for basically just more of a bid. And at 796, I was blue player every game, so I think the bid worked well for me. I think I would have been blue player none of the games without it also. So that was efficient.
Yeah, you beat me by 1 point.
Yep.
And I was blue player in my other 3 games. So
yeah.
That seems like the perfect range right there.
The value of bidding has of course gone down a lot with key positions no longer in the game. Or the old version of key positions where you could put 2 objectives very close to you and just make them come to you. But there are still some situations where it's quite strong. In particular, I like blue player on moisture evaporators because you win ties. So you can sort of make them have to come and make a play.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. There were actually 2 of my games I was blue as on moisture evaporators. So it does make a difference. It's not nearly as bad as key positions was, but
it can be.
Yeah.
It does put the pressure on your opponent for sure.
Yeah, the old key positions, it's like by default it was 2-1 and you were winning on actual objective points. And with moisture evaporators on blue, it depends a lot actually on the deployment type also. But you can get it so that the default is kind of 4-4, where each person does their evaporator twice, and then you win on tiebreak. But being in a position to win on tiebreak is a lot less stable than being in a position to win on actual victory points.
How useful was
Right,
strict
because-
orders in your list?
It was medium. I didn't have... So I had it with covering fire, but I ended up never actually playing covering fire throughout the event. So that was not amazing. I did have some situations where strict orders... I think in the 3rd game, I had a situation where I had Luke, and I was kind of waiting to activate him, and the opponent had put 3 suppression on him, so I activated and used strict orders to get the automatic... rally in that situation. So that was kind of nice. Your odds are of course better than even to rally at least 1 on 3 dice, but I believe it's by no means a guaranteed thing. I think the odds are, what is it? I think you have a 16. Is that right? I'm a little derping on the...
I'll look it up while you're talking.
Yeah, I'm a little derping on the math here. I think it's actually you have a 19 and 27 chance to make it, so a little bit better than 2/3.
Yeah, so if you have 3 suppression, you've got a 71% chance to rally one of them.
Okay, let me see if my calculation was right. Oh yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, 19/24. Not 19/27.
Yep.
Or no. I'm sorry. It is 19/27. What did you say it was? 71%.
71.
Okay. Anyway, that's a cool thing to do. So basically, it just makes the thing a little more reliable. And there's a few other things that it did. I think there was a situation where, I think there were 1 or 2 situations where like it happened on a trooper unit. But again, kind of a luxury upgrade. Originally, I had been thinking about strict orders in order to get Pathfinders so they could use duck and cover and then still be reliably not suppressed to potentially take the objective and run. This was back when I was thinking a lot about using the box grab tactic. But I think that tactic did not end up being as effective as I was thinking it would be in theory. However, I kept around strict orders because Esteemed Leader hasn't been performing that much for me, and I had some extra points.
You mentioned covering fire and not playing it, although if I had to say what list was like the most covering firingest list, it would be a 6z6 list like yours. Was it just opportunity cost?
No, I mean, a lot of it was just that games were ending relatively early. I think my first game, my opponent conceded on turn 2. I don't remember what turn the second game got to, but I think it was a concede on turn 3 or 4. I think the third game was a concede on turn 3 or 4. And then the last game, I actually would have played it maybe on that last turn where I think it could have been cool. But I ended up going with standing orders instead because I wanted to stall as much as possible so that my Luke could have like the last word on that center key position.
What was the game state in your first game where they conceded on turn 2?
Oh, it was actually absurd. I got very lucky. This was a game where I was playing against a Veers Boba list, pretty standard Veers Boba. He had like Veers, Boba with Stims and Hunter, 5 Z6s, and one of them has a comms tech with comms relay to do coordinated fire. Imperial Royal Guard with Electro Staff, and they probably had tenacity and environmental gear or whatever. And then 2 snipers, so just extremely standard list. And I had kind of gotten an advantage on attrition, and it was looking like things were sort of going my way. It was again key positions, and my opponent kind of decided, okay, I'm not going to focus on attrition. I'm not even going to focus on key positions. I'm going to claim my home objective, and I'm going to try to score the bounty with Boba against Luke, and then win on tie breaks, having killed Luke and kind of pulling back with other forces. I think that was his plan. And so Luke had taken 2 wounds, and Boba fired his rocket at him, having aimed and then having Hunter to get double aim. He rerolls into 5 crits. And I spend a dodge token just to turn on deflect, and I roll 3 deflects and 2 blocks. Yeah, it was ridiculous. So not only did he not kill Luke, he didn't even wound Luke, and in fact his Boba took 3 wounds and got knocked onto his own stims. And at that point my opponent just conceded. Which, probably it was technically too early to concede. He could have come back, but the situation was looking really unfavorable, and I think that was just a demoralizing role to deal with also, especially because he had been sort of planning to go for that bounty rather than going for the normal stuff. And even though he would have had one more turn of using Boba potentially thanks to the stims, he wouldn't have been able to claim the bounty, so that was kind of that.
Gotcha. He sort of pigeonholed himself into that strategy, and then it just completely backfired.
Yeah, I mean, it was, if the opposite had happened, if I had blanked out on those saves and Luke had been knocked onto stims, it would have been a very different game. Sure. But that is not what happened.
Probably just wanted to save his legs at that point.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a pretty tilting experience, I would imagine.
Oh, extremely.
Yeah, that was a very lucky situation for me, very abnormal.
What would you change anything going in hindsight about your list?
This might sound bad, but basically no. I think my list was very well positioned for the current meta and environment. I think what I would most want to do is I would want to test more and maybe run a very different list, because I think this list is sort of boring, and I think it's something that people, broadly speaking, know what it does. It doesn't really have very many surprises. It just has very high efficiency. I think I would prefer to take a list that was efficient and surprising, and I was working on kind of some alternate compositions, the most notable one being a Leia Chewie Pathfinder build that I think can actually do the box grab fairly safely. But I hadn't played enough testing games with that to feel confident taking it into a very major tournament. And I've played quite a few games with just standard Wonder Twins, so I decided to go for a more standard list. At LVO, I had fielded a 1.4 FD cannon, but I had dropped that from the composition because at LVO there weren't really that many vehicles, and I anticipated that there would be even fewer vehicles at this event, just based on based on what people were running for the LCQ, and just based on how the meta had sort of evolved since then. I think vehicles are actually poised to make a comeback now that the tank is about to come out, which I think is going to be quite strong. So, we'll see whether or not it remains the case that not taking anti-armor is a good strategy. But in this meta, I figured, just taking 6 Z6s instead of 5 Z6s and an FD is going to enable me to have a somewhat more mobile force and still have a lot of efficient firepower.
If you were to change your list to kind of deal with the tank meta, how would you do that?
I don't know. I need to play testing games with the tank. The big question for me with the tank is whether or not its side arc weakness means that you can defeat it with basically normal strategies. I did have one game where I played against an ATRT, and it was a rotary ATRT, which is actually kind of dangerous against rebels, but I was able to take it out by just rolling crits against it with Z6s, and I got a little lucky with that. I think I got more crits than his average. His saves were slightly above average, but I think my crits were more above average than his saves were. But I think that the big question for me on the tank is whether or not you actually need anti-tank stuff. If so, there's a bunch of different things that are potentially interesting, including, I know people have been talking about this a lot for Invader League, the Luke Sabine list. Luke is really strong against the tank because he can melee it in the side, and then he's essentially hitting it with Impact 3 and Pierce 2. So that's actually very, very powerful. You're not going to kill it in one hit, but that's going to do substantial expected damage, even though it's an armored target. And if Sabine can jump into the side arc herself and kind of do a similar thing, it could easily be the case that sort of composition is sufficient without long-range anti-tank. In terms of long-range anti-tank, I do think the FD is the best option that the Rebels have at present. But again, it's going to depend on what loadouts are popular with the tank. If people are putting that RT-97C pintle on there so that they can just sit back and shoot at range 4, it's possible they'll be able to play around the FD fairly easily, and that won't necessarily be the best solution.
Yeah, it strikes me that the FD cannon is immobile, and so you don't have a chance to respond to the movements of the tank. You're just sort of, at the mercy of wherever your opponent decides to turn the arc.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that if the FD just sits there and shoots into the front armor of the tank, it will actually be pretty efficient at damaging the tank. So I don't really think it needs the side arc per se, since it already has 2 points of impact. But I think that there's a chance that a good opponent will be able to play around it. I don't think the tank is going to see use primarily as a transport. I think it's actually just a good fighting unit. And as a result of that, I don't think it needs to come to you in the same way that an ATST needs to come to you to be able to use its grenade launcher and be efficient.
So are you, what units or upgrades are you looking forward to that are coming out in the next few months? I know you obviously.
The thing that I'm most excited for Rebels, I think the obvious easy answer is clones. I think Clone Wars is going to be really exciting. I have several friends in the local area who have not gotten into the game yet, but have been talking about potentially getting in once Clone Wars stuff comes out. I'm going to try to host an escalation league at the local store where we sort of start at a smaller points value so that people who are getting into it with clones can use a core set type army and kind of build up as we go. And so that's the most exciting thing. In terms of things that I want to play in my current armies, I think that the most interesting of the currently previewed units for me is actually the Tauntaun Writers. I think those the models are really cool. They're actually much bigger than you might expect. I saw the preview models, and unless they were showing us 3-ups or something, which I think would be extremely crazy, I think that the Tauntaun models are much larger than you would expect. They're probably comparable. They're a little bit smaller than an ATRT, but less so than you might think.
Yeah, they had some actually at the FFG booth in the vendor hall in the case there, and they're quite sizable.
Yeah, I remember they were next to the land speeder, and the Tauntaun Riders were like substantially taller than the land speeder.
Yep.
I think that's a really interesting unit. I see it as basically similar to the Imperial speeder bikes, but probably a lot better. Because their move is not compulsory, so you can choose to hold them back until the right moment, whereas speeder bikes have this problem where they often kind of rush in. I like being able to be conservative and hold back my forces when necessary. But the Tauntauns strike me as a option for kind of a flanking unit or like a response unit that is strong and not too expensive. On the Imperial side of things, I'm probably most excited about Bosk. Bosk seems really cool.
Yeah, I'm actually for Invader League Season 3, I'm doing a Freaky Friday and playing Empire.
I had considered doing that myself. I think Empire has more interesting stuff to test right now. I'm a skeptic on the land speeder. I don't think the land speeder is going to prove good, but we'll have to see.
Yeah, I agree. The weapons look just too expensive, unfortunately.
Man, you guys are just a bunch of haters. God.
Look, I mean, I don't know. I look at the land speeder medium blaster, and I'm like, okay, so this gun costs more points than the ATRT rotary. It has surge to hit instead of surge to crit, and it has 4 dice instead of 5 dice. That just seems objectively bad to me. And I say that I consider the ATRT rotary to be overpriced itself. So the land speeder... Now, the land speeder does have a whole lot of resilience over the ATRT, but I don't know that it's enough, you know? We'll have to see how it goes, but I think the guns are not priced at kind of the range that I would want them to be at for me to be excited to use the unit like that in competitive play. And I hope that I'm proven wrong. I hope the land speeder is actually really good, but you know, we'll have to see how things pan out. I think the transport rules are pretty mediocre. I don't really see a lot of reason to transport models. In particular, the fact that you can't shoot out of the transport vehicle makes it a lot less exciting than it could be.
I have to say I came to roughly the same conclusion recently in my own kind of list building, theory crafting. You know, where do I go from here now that AdeptiCon's over?
Yeah.
You know, if the transport rules don't let you transport the coolest things that could be transported, then you have to look at using it as a gun platform, and then you run smack into the same cost issue.
Yeah, exactly. I do think you can put Luke in it and get Luke up the board faster, but the thing that I really dislike about that is that I believe that the land speeder is a lot more vulnerable than Luke is. And if the land speeder is... Because the land speeder, like, yeah, sure, it has armor, and maybe you take the pilot to give it cover. So you can be at cover 2 and armor 2 and ignore the first 4 hits, but it's still a weight defense die with surge that you're going to be rolling against like the random crits that get in, and it makes you substantially bigger and harder to hide. So I think putting Luke in the land speeder is actually pretty dangerous relative to just running him on foot. And as a result of that, I'm kind of skeptical of, you know, we will try, have to see. I want to try it out. I want to run like a list with 1 land speeder where, you know, maybe it's inefficient, but it's not so bad. And we'll test out, you know, we'll put Luke in there and we'll see if like advancing Luke that extra amount forward makes enough of a difference for it to be worth it. But as it stands, I don't think... I'm a very efficiency focused player. Like I guess you can see that from my list where I'm just taking, you know, Z6s, which are very efficient shooting units, snipers, which are very efficient shooting units, and Luke and Leia, who I consider to be probably the 2 best commanders in the game.
And that seems to be the dominant mode right now in terms of just list building generally. And there's some people, I think, right, that would say, well, it should be because we're playing a numbers game, essentially. But then,
I don't think it's the only mode. I think that, like, if you look at Nick Freeman's list, I think that isn't a list that's based on maximizing, like, notional efficiency, but he still did very well with it.
I mean, that list does, though, have a ton of, like, well, efficiencies internal to itself. You know what I mean? Like, it has the hunter snipers. It has the, you know, interaction between Han and Chewie. It has the interaction between Chewie and snipers. You know, it has a lot of like built-in redundancies.
I'm not saying it's like an inefficient list or like a totally janky list or whatever.
No.
But I take Z6s on my squads and I don't take extra troopers because the Z6 is more efficient than the extra trooper. So taking the Z6 makes you more efficient, and taking the extra trooper brings you back more towards the basic efficiency level, which is lower. So he was using both of those, which gives him a more reliable way to punch through cover, even if it's like less overall efficient. I don't think that's necessarily bad, but that's just like not the thing that I'm most inclined to do.
Oh, okay.
So like to put it in a more direct terms, if I were going to play a Han Leia Chewie list similar to what Nick was playing, I would probably end up on 11 activations instead of 10 activations, dropping a bunch of the upgrades to take one more unit. And I think I mathed it out, and if you dropped the Hunter and Recon on the 3 snipers, that's 24. And then you drop 4 extra troopers, so that's 64, and then that's the 62 points that you need to buy another Z6 unit.
You would be correct, yes.
Yeah, so that's sort of the type of thing that I think about when I'm making a list, just going for like straightforwardly like efficient, relatively unupgraded units and taking them in large numbers. What was that quote? I think it's attributed to Joseph Stalin, and I don't know if it's actually a real quote, but it's like quantity has a quality all its own. That philosophy has done well for me. That philosophy has done well for me in Legion.
Do you have any other like highlights from your games over the course of the day that stand out?
Let me think about that. Oh yeah, in my second game, this was also on stream. This was the other game that was on the jungle table. There was a very interesting situation where my opponent had pathfinders that were kind of hidden behind a little like temple structure. So what I did is I had Luke go to them and force push them out into the open and then charge them on my side of the temple so that I could get into melee with them and kill them and still be on my side to have blocked line of sight or at least heavy cover from his shooting. So I did that, and he responded by force pushing me onto his side of the temple with his Luke. And then he did Son of Skywalker. He meleeed me. He ended up putting me on my stims, and I recovered and force pushed him back onto my side of the temple and went in there and swung at his Luke. I think I only did like 1 wound with my Luke attack, but now he was on my side, and I was able to shoot a bunch of stuff and kill him. So basically we had traded Lukes, except my Luke had also finished off his Pathfinders. And from there, it was evident that I was going to begin retreating, and my opponent conceded because it was going to come down to victory points thanks to moisture evaporators. So I thought that was an interesting play or series of plays by myself and the opponent that sort of went to showcase the power of force push, which is, in my opinion, a completely overpowered card. I don't know what the appropriate cost for force push is, but I think it's at least 20, and it might be more than that. I think 10 is it's auto include. At least on people who can move fast. There's an argument for not taking it on Vader, but honestly, I think you want it on Vader also, and probably you don't actually take it on Palpatine because that's not really his like main mode of interaction.
Yeah, that's how I feel about it.
But on people who can move fast, force push is silly. I think if Obi-Wan has the ability to move fast, then force push is probably going to be a very common upgrade on him as well.
Yeah, I feel like when I don't take Luke, I miss force push more than I actually miss like Luke's lightsaber.
Yeah, that's one of the main things. People have been talking about taking Sabine instead of Luke. Sabine has like people have been talking about like the Leia Sabine list. I don't know if there's like a catchy name for that. But the Leia Sabine list, I don't know. I look at Sabine and it's like Sabine is probably tougher than Luke. She's a little more vulnerable to getting bad rolls, but you do have that 2/3 save instead of the 1/2 save, and you don't have to, you don't have to rely on deflect to get the save improvement. And then she also has nimble. But I don't know, force push has a lot of power. Force push has a lot of power.
That's why you don't take it.
I also like Luke's command cards. Sorry, what was that?
That's why you don't take her instead. You take them together.
Yeah, that's the other thing. So people have been talking about Luke and Sabine, and that's actually a list that's pretty interesting to me. We'll have to see how that does. To me, that seems a little aggro, but I could be wrong. I often play Luke pretty aggressively, but I also like having the ability to sit back and shoot if need be.
Yeah, Sabine can't really do that.
Yeah, I like to
gun-
be. I mean, I don't know. I guess you can kind of play her like Boba Fett and like jump her on top of buildings and use gunslinger and whatever. But I like being able to say like, okay, man, you're the one who's gonna have to come to me, and I'm gonna because I have more of an ability to pick off your guys at a long distance than you have an ability to pick off my guys. So you're the one who needs to kind of make the play in order to cause this game to go in your direction.
I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah. Oh, actually, so there's one thing I wanted to point out actually about that game, which was a rule that I might have got wrong during the game. There's been a big discussion on the Discord server today about whether or not you can move to touch difficult area terrain without actually going into it, whether you can do that to avoid slowing down.
Yeah, that was a deal with those heavy cover ruins on the one side of that map.
Yeah, there was like the overgrown ruins that were played as area terrain, and there was a point where you were wondering whether or not you could move up and like go there. And I was pretty sure you couldn't, but it sounds like it's possible you can, at least if these arguments people are saying are right. I still sort of think it's the other way, but we're going to have to wait for the devs to clarify it. In any case, my apologies if I ended up misleading with that rule.
It's okay. I don't think it would have made a difference at all because, you were still on your temple thing, which would have still given you heavy cover, even if I'd moved up to touch
yeah, I think I had moved one squad off under the assumption that you couldn't do that. So I guess if it had been clarified that you can do that, if that's the way the ruling ends up going, I would have just had them stay on the temple instead and been even more boring.
Yeah.
If I'd been surprised by it, I guess those guys would have died on like turn 4 instead of turn 5 or whatever, but I think the overall outcome was not that swung by it. But I wanted to highlight that as something that I had potentially gotten wrong.
Yeah. Hearing how short your other games were, I'm sort of proud to have lasted until turn 5.
Yeah, no. It was actually the longest and closest of my games, probably. Let me think about that. Yeah, I think that's accurate. I guess the second game was kind of closer in that there were like a bunch of important dice rolls and stuff going on, but once those went my way, the game was no longer close. It was like basically like, okay, now we know what's going to happen. Yeah, it's complicated. It's hard to really determine like what closeness is or whatever in this game.
Yeah, especially if things swing early. You can have some really important developments early that cause a huge swing.
Yeah, so in that game, the big question was whether or not all my shooting was actually going to be able to kill his Luke, because if it didn't, he had like a reasonable chance to get away back around the corner, and then I have to come to him, and the situation doesn't look so good for me. But after I did in fact get his Luke, then it was like, okay, so now things are looking pretty nice on my side.
So they haven't actually told us, I think, like when Worlds is, but
I think somebody told me it was late in June.
Yeah, I think that was the original date, but I remember.
Oh, is it shifted?
Something like it was going to shift. Yeah.
Well, they're paying for the flight, so I'm, if they want to wait until the week before and pay more money for my flight, what of it?
Yeah, I don't think my wife would be happy about that, but
no, it's true. Yeah, there's other stuff like I don't know. It'd be good to know so that I don't end up committing to teach at workshops or whatever that are going to be in conflict, but we'll see how it goes. I'm personally looking forward to Worlds. They also haven't really said what the format of Worlds is. It's 8 people, so one thing they could do is just like, okay, Worlds is 3 games. It's just like a single elimination bracket. I'm personally hoping that it's at least like double elimination or round robin or something, but we'll have to see how it goes.
I think that's way more interesting.
Yeah, I would agree. I would love to see round robin. I mean, they have us. At least originally, they were going to have us there for like 2 or 3 days. So I don't know why you wouldn't do round robin if that's the case.
Yeah, you could do it pretty easily. Do 4 games one day, 3 games another day. That's a totally maintainable pace. Especially since if the whole event is 8 people, you don't need as much of a break in between rounds to figure stuff out.
All right, man. Well, you guys got any other questions for Davis?
Nah, man. Good job. It was cool seeing you rocket offline as opposed to just online for once.
Yeah, congratulations.
Yeah. Thank you. My apologies for doing it with a comparatively boring comparatively boring setup. I hope to try out some more innovative strategies in the future.
We'll be looking for you running Tauntauns alongside that land speeder.
You know, a lot. We'll have to see. We'll have to see. I don't think that's what's in the cards. But if that did end up being good, I would be really pleased. Actually, I'd actually love to be able to run, like, you know, in Warhammer 40K, there's like a very wide diversity of armies. I don't like Warhammer 40K that much, but one thing they do that's cool is that there's like sort of an army for all kinds of different play styles, if that makes sense. And one of the armies in there is Dark Eldar, who are like, they're basically dark elves. And they are very fast and very fragile, but they can sort of go almost wherever they want. And they have a lot of kind of like mobile glass cannon type units where they're very fast and they're hard hitting. But if the opponent can like get them in their sights, you know, you're not going to do so good. And it would actually be really cool to me if you could do like a rebel list that had a bunch of Tauntauns and speeders and stuff like that. And it was like very, very mobile. And you could sort of pick, you know, you could try to find a weak spot in your opponent's setup and like really get everyone moving in there and isolating that. That would be a very cool thing, in my opinion. Unfortunately, I think the land speeder is not really very functional as a transport. So I don't think that's going to be the main part of that. But we'll have to see how things go.
Yeah, I'm excited. It sounds like we may have some time over the next few months to experiment. So I'm curious and excited to see what you come up with.
Thanks.
All right. Well, that was Davis Kingsley, winner of High Command at AdeptiCon.
Oh, one other thing I'll say. I said this at the event too. Like, I'm technically the winner, but I'm the winner based on strength of schedule. It's sort of arbitrary. Like Nick Freeman and I were both undefeated. I don't think that I like meaningfully did that much better than him. I just like went up against opponents who did slightly better themselves. And if anything, he deserves some kudos for going undefeated with a quite off meta list, as opposed to me, who is about as on meta as it gets.
Hey, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, right?
Yep, exactly right.
So that was our interview with Davis Kingsley, the winner of High Command Invitational based on his 4-0 record and strength of schedule. So I believe we owe everybody a conversation about some awesome Clone Wars reveals.
Dun-dun-dun-dun.
So the thing that I was most stoked about, I have previously lamented, coming from a GW hobby background on just the customability. I don't know. There's a word in there.
Customizability.
There we go.
Thank you, David.
You're welcome.
Of the Legion miniatures, or more accurately, lack thereof. So the biggest thing for me was that all the CIS stuff is going to be on hard plastic, and that they're moving to that essentially as a business model from here on out.
So for maybe our viewers that have never worked with hard plastic before, what does that mean, Kyle?
So the stuff that your Legion models, for the most part, except the vehicles that are currently made out of, is PVC, which is like soft plastic. You know, you might notice that those sniper rifle tips or Luke's lightsaber get kind of bendy like in heat, or sometimes when you take them out of the bag, like you got to actually run them under hot water and straighten it out and bend it. And sometimes it bends back. And like sometimes the arms don't fit properly, and you got to fill those things with gaps, and there's mold lines. And, generally speaking, like, it's a little bit easier probably to just slap something together, but making it look good from a hobby perspective is a whole nother challenge. Hard plastic allows you to do basically like much more detail, and also allows for a much greater range of poses because it's more stable and stronger, and you can make like thinner support structures. So, the B1 droids, and Alex said this in an interview on stream, he essentially said like they would have been impossible to do with PVC just because those models are so, like their legs and their arms are so spindly and thin. So a lot of people that aren't used to hobbying are like, I got to cut these things off sprues. I got to put 5 pieces together instead of 3. Personally, I think this is a great development for the game. because you can have every single one
Yeah.
of your B1 droids can look different, all 36 of them, if you want. And Grievous,
I can't
I'm
wait.
so excited. And Grievous has like
Uh,
5 different arm options, and they're all on ball joints, so you can like wiggle them around and pose them and give them 2 arms on one side and 1 arm on the next, and a gun or 2. It's like there's just an infinite number, cape or no cape.
Right.
So I'm definitely going for cape.
Yeah, like I've got the soft plastic Krennic model in front of me that I just opened like a day or two ago. Like it would be really difficult to like cut the cape off this model to make it look like anything else, This is going to be open up a world of possibilities.
Yeah, and just like more broadly, it also is indicative of FFG's commitment to the game, because hard plastic is more technically difficult and much more expensive to produce. So it essentially means, like, from an infrastructure and personnel perspective, Fantasy Flight has invested, like actual capital in setting up the necessary procedures and technical personnel and manufacturing infrastructure to actually produce hard plastic for Legion. So I think it's a great, it means that FFG is invested in the future of the game, which is a great sign to me.
Thank you, FFG.
Yeah, it's awesome. I mean, this is literally like my only complaint with the game. The mechanics are excellent compared to other miniatures games, but I was like, man, I really wish that the minis were posable and had better detail. And thank you.
Oh, incoming, because you're getting just that with the sprues.
Right?
Exactly.
And Alex said that they at least they have tentative plans to like go back and redo everything that's been released so far eventually in this hard plastic, which is just boggles my mind a little bit, because that's also like a pretty heavy investment to like redo all your molds and all that jazz for miniatures that have already been released. It's just crazy.
It's a great sign for the future of the game.
Yeah,
it means they're in it for the long haul.
Yep.
And short term, it means that like, despite, I know that some people in some markets have been like, oh, we don't have a ton of people that play Legion around here. People are buying this product, or else they would not be invested in it.
Yep. And I bet everybody knows, or most people know, someone that said that they're interested in the game, but they're going to wait until Clone Wars comes out.
Q3
ish.
Yep.
I'm so excited.
So that said, if you're an experienced player, you should adopt a newbie once they get into the game and be their shepherd.
Split a core with a newbie. In fact, members of the community out there, you should probably take up the banner on that one. Split a core box with a newbie.
Yep. I'm gonna find someone to split a core with, because I want those droids.
Yeah, Kyle in the car asked me like at least twice. He was like, "So you want to split a core box?" I was like, "No, I'm playing Republic and CIS.
Right,
go find both. Someone else."
I'm sure that there will be somebody out there that will heed my call.
Yeah. Maybe I'll split one core box with you, but I'm getting 3 because Grievous is posable and I can have 3 to look different.
I've actually been trying to think of ways to magnetize his arms so you can just like move him around whenever you want. That would have playability issues. I don't think I'd ever use that in a tournament, but that'd be fun to like attach his gun for one game and like the lightsabers for the next.
So I want to step aside here for a second and talk a little bit about the potential ramifications this has on competitive play. And I don't mean negative ramifications. Ramifications are generally have a negative connotation, but I think this opens the door for like just using completely unique models for like character stuff. I know some people have already sort of tested the waters on that. And with the new like alt Darth Vader we're getting from Star Wars Celebration, like we haven't got anything official on if that's going to be legal or not. But if all of a sudden you can pose your B1 battle droids however you want, it would seem to me that like you could go back and like completely pose Luke so that his lightsaber is not sticking straight up in the air.
Yeah, I mean, well, it remains to be seen how the competitive community is going to address that sort of thing. But
Yeah.
I think you're probably right. I mean, you look at games like 40K, where every model is posable in hard plastic for the most part, except for those poor aspect warriors. And
Right. They're still in metal.
They're still in metal
sculpts.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Yeah.
Eldar.
And like the reason that this is such a hot topic in Legion is because when you buy Luke Skywalker, he only comes one way, right, with his lightsaber sticking straight up in the air. But if Luke Skywalker came with ball joints on the arms and 4 different arm options, like there would be no right way to pose Luke, so it wouldn't even be a conversation. You pose Luke however you want, and you go from there. Like, so I think you're right. I think generally speaking, this is certainly on the new models. This is going to open up a lot of customization possibilities. It remains to be seen how this is going to apply, like, quote unquote, retroactively from like a TO perspective. But I have a feeling that you're right. I think this is going to open up a lot, which is great from a hobby perspective. You guys got anything else on? So they actually did like preview some of the fuzzy text and rules and stuff in the articles, but we can save that for another cast because that's like a whole nother thing.
Yeah.
It's virtually a whole other episode by itself.
There's a lot to unbox there. Suffice to say, we got Phase 1 clones, Obi-Wan Kenobi, that speeder looking thing. We got General Grievous, we got B1 battle droids, and we got droidecas. Also known as Roly Boys.
Droidicas?
I've always called them droidicas. But maybe we just all need to call them Roly Boys.
A Roly Boys is probably the best one.
Yeah, it's gonna be awesome.
Yeah.
So a couple things also. I mean, you should just check out the stream. But Alex talked about like their mechanics and stuff like that.
Yeah, in that 30-minute interview before LCQ, he really like kind of delved into some of the stuff we can look forward to.
Yep, it sounds like it's gonna be really interesting and neat. So.
Yeah, he talked about a bunch of like mechanics and stuff that just, I don't know, really cool. You should check it out. 5th Trooper YouTube.
Yep, totally. Watch all
also
24 hours.
Those mad fools. Those mad fools. Hello there as a command card now.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Hello there.
The memes are going to be awesome.
They're so real.
I mean, that's the best part about the Clone Wars, right? Is that you've got like all these like maybe not so great quotes that are great quotes because they're just memes.
Yep, totally.
Yeah, they're memes at this point. Now your memes are command cards.
Yep.
Right.
So you can let your memes be dreams.
Let your memes
on
be
the
dreams.
tabletop.
Do we want to hype Invader League Season 3 real quick before we close this thing out?
Of course we want to hype Invader League Season 3 because we got some awesome stuff going on. Also, quick shout out to LJ. Thank you for continuing the Invader League train. We know it's a lot of work, but we love it. Keep doing it.
Yep.
Yeah, so now there's 13 US groups of 6, so that's a lot of players.
I think we've got over 100 people this year, or very close to it.
Yeah, there's 13 groups. So what's 13 times 6?
I want to say 78.
But there's also
EU
groups
too.
Yeah.
I think it is over 100.
Yeah,
that sounds right. That's crazy.
Yeah, it's over 100 people. That's a lot. So we're going to be streaming. I'm going to be streaming a bunch because Yavin Base is a Twitch channel. So there's also a bunch of new streamers that have joined us, and so this IL3 continues the trend of growth. More people coming into the game, more people playing, more people watching. So it's going to be a really great time. And if you haven't joined the Legion Discord yet, you should go join it. You could ask on Facebook for an invite link, or just find it through Google Legion Discord. And you could also go to yavinbase.wordpress.com if you want to just get an invite link through my webpage. But just come check it out because it's going to be really, really sweet. And now, what's this in the show notes about Freaky Friday?
Oh boy, here it comes. Kyle, you can go first.
All right, so I am not playing Rebels for Invader League 3.
Blasphemy.
I know. So I wanted to get a view from the other side, so to speak. So I'm gonna mess around with Empire for at least for Invader League. I'm sure I'm gonna end up playing Rebels again for Worlds because I don't have any Empire models at the moment.
Yeah, we can give some of you.
I know
on loan.
that's an easily fixable problem if I so chose. But I'm still a rebel at heart. But I wanted to mess around a little bit, so we're gonna try Empire for Invader League and see how it goes.
Come join the dark side.
Yeah, and you're
I'm so disappointed.
you're joining the light side.
I am. I get to be a traitor for a month. It's gonna be great. Yeah. Frankly, there's a lot of. Don't get me wrong. The stuff for both factions that's like in the pipeline here is super cool. Like Bosk looks great, but the Rebel stuff kind of just is much more intriguing to me, and I kind of wanted to mess around with it. I think Luke Sabine's going to be really good. I'm really excited about that. I think the people are the slipper something
X-34
celestial slipper terrestrial slipper, yeah, same thing. People are a little down on it, but I actually think it's pretty good. So I might play a little of that. I think that the rebel lists generally have a lot of interesting like range 4 options now that they didn't have access to previously, between like Pathfinders, the X-34, they got snipers, they got a bunch of stuff, and I think it can make for like a really cool list. And I'd kind of like want to play around with like the transport option on the X-34 too, because I think there's a lot of people are dismissing it, but I think there's some really cool things you can do with it.
It does look really fun, and like I did some math on some of the loadouts for it. It does hit it hits pretty hard. I almost said like a truck, but that's kind of what it's supposed to be.
There's no wheels.
There's no wheels.
Yeah,
I'm excited to see someone like try and blow up a SAB model so that they can fit it in the X-34 and then do like a suicide bomb with the SAB.
Is that actually how that works? Like, if you kill a dude, like he can, and like you have it, like for instance, let's say you have like a rebel trooper unit that only has a unit leader. Can they jump in?
I think so. I don't see why not. It doesn't say anything about maximum unit size. It just says one small base mini.
Wow.
So theoretically, if you were trying to not lose on points, you could like throw a rebel trooper unit and run away.
Yeah.
Not that sounds particularly good, but
yeah, because he can still die while he's in it.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he's gonna suffer a wound with the land speeder is wounded thanks to the transport rules.
Cover 2, armor 2 is like way more defense than he would have on the table.
That's true. Crits don't care. That's all I'm gonna say.
Crits don't care. Sure. That's gonna be the hashtag for the X-34.
Yeah, crits don't care. Pretty much.
Well, So yeah, I mean, I'm just looking forward to doing something like move on the last action of one turn, and then like move, shoot, and then like Han disembarks and gunslingers a bunch of stuff.
Oh yeah, I'm digging that idea too.
like
I just love that from a theme perspective. I'm picturing Han like sliding across the hood, Dukes of Hazzard style, and just like
firing both his guns.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, theoretically, you could go move. Could you do 2 moves before you disembark? Does the compulsory move count as a move for the transport rules?
It does.
I think it does. Yeah.
Okay, so you couldn't double move, so you couldn't do 5, but you could do 4, conceivably.
Mm-hmm.
That's like a long way. On it.
Yeah.
that is
like a really long way.
That's across the table, basically, like the long way.
And you do that, and you so you've got like an uplink on the speeder, and you play like reckless diversion the turn that Han gets out of the speeder.
Yep.
And so the speeder goes, and then Han goes, and he's like gunslinging things, hopefully behind some heavy cover at range 2, along with the speeder who's gunning other things down, and they have to like shoot something over there. It feels so like Scoundrelly and Han to me that it just sounds really cool.
I'm
I
excited.
wonder if the people would ever mod the land speeder to look like the car from Solo.
That'd be cool.
That'd be kind of cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I bet
dig
somebody will
that.
try that.
Yeah. So, anyways, that's why I'm playing Rebels. I think it's going to be awesome. Unfortunately, it sounds like Tauntauns won't be legal, at least until
Dope.
elimination stage. Though I think they're also really good.
Yeah, I agree.
But
Also, they look awesome. They had them. They had the physical
Yeah.
models at AdeptiCon. So if you haven't seen those pics, check them out.
all the physical models at Adepticon looked amazing.
Yep.
We got to see the Grievous. We got to see all the Clone Wars stuff. It was beautiful. It was absolutely beautiful.
Totally. All right.
Is that are we wrapping for today, gentlemen?
I mean, we
think
could talk
so.
about Adepticon for like 3 episodes, but
Yeah, we really could.
I didn't even
We
actually.
probably will talk about Adepticon for 3 episodes.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't
to
actually
some
like
extent.
talk about my list at all either.
Yeah,
No.
me
not
either.
that it's been a secret, but I ran the same thing
Yeah.
I've been talking about. But we can save that for another episode. I'm sure that people want to see the top 8 lists. As soon as we have those, we'll let you guys know.
Yeah.
But yeah,
So next we've got some special stuff planned. It should, if everything pans out the way we want it to, be a pretty special episode overall. So we're looking forward to that. I guess we'll probably tease it over the course of the next week or so.
Yep.
So stay tuned on Facebook and the Discord and stuff for updates. Anything closing before we get out of here, guys?
no, I'm super stoked for the next few months of Legion and the future of the game in general.
Likewise, man. It's going to be amazing.
Sweet. So that's our episode today, guys. Thank you for listening. We're the Notorious Scoundrels. I'm Dash.
I'm Kyle, aka Orchimedes.
And I'm David, also known as Endless.
Have a good one, guys.
Join us next time for another edition of the Notorious Scoundrels podcast. This has been a Fifth Trooper production.